Hello guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Welcome to HP to XP. I am Chris, the Dungeon Master for our Adventures in Umbranthal campaign, and today we are going to be talking about map making, the difference between the world you can build with a map versus using theater of the mind, and some best practices that I have found for creating compelling and interesting maps that your players can interact with. All right, so the information that I'm going to get into today is drawn from a live stream we did on Twitch, and we are going to go through and build a couple of maps using the DungeonDraft software. I want to say first and foremost, this is not a sponsored video. We pay for all of the software that we use. I just like using DungeonDraft, so it's the tool I'm illustrating. But you could do this with Incarnate or another map-making software if you wanted to. The tools, the ideas, the best practices, the must-have, should-have, could-have, and won't-have information doesn't change from tool to tool. So, as you get into this video, I want you to think about the map grammar you're going to use and how that is going to communicate to your players what matters at your table. Let's just use this small map scale and begin creating some basic terrain features that give us a sense of what is going to happen. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and create a little bit of a river type space. Let's go ahead and grab a brush. We'll adjust that brush. So I'm going to say that this river, for argument's sake, is just going to run north to south along this map, right? So we're looking at this map now in the kind of information, the kind of narrative that we want to tell, both spatially and graphically. Well, I've done a couple of things here, right? So my landscape, if I consistently use this coloring, this background of map to be mountain terrain, my players and the rest of my audience will begin to understand the grammar of the map really quickly. If I want to convey information, I need to be consistent in how I do that. We're going to call that the visual grammar of the map. So if I use this terrain color, the mountain terrain color, for mountains, prairies, grasslands, it doesn't tell my player anything. It doesn't tell my audience anything about the space. Does it have to? No, it does not have to. But what I'm telling people, if I use it in multiple areas, is that I'm telling them that's just an art asset. It's just a creative tool. It's not a piece of information. That can be fine. You have to make that decision, right? What is the narrative that you are telling with this map? So, in a very short period of time, with the information here, you look at this map and in about 2 seconds, you can orient yourself pretty easy, right? Okay, I've got a map that I can cross in 2.5 turns. There's a river obstacle. I want you to start thinking about the idea of the information that you're using in terms of movement. And the two terms that I'm going to use in discussing this is surfaces and gaps. Gaps are areas where movement is easy. Surfaces are areas where movement is restricted. So in this case, the surface on the map that we're worried about is this river. A river is a difficult thing to cross. It requires some sort of effort. A waterway is a surface to a terrestrial creature. A waterway is not a surface to a flying creature. These things matter. So what are these surfaces? What are the things that you're going to bump up against? So we know we have a river. What are some other surfaces that we would be likely to find? I am going to go ahead and use this asset pack from 2 Minute Tabletop. Again, not paid, not sponsored, bought it ourselves. We're going to use this elevation, right? So now I'm going to turn off grid for a minute, just so that we're not worried about the movement scale right now. We know what our movement scale is. Now we can begin positioning information sort of. This is where we start getting into topographic information a little bit, right? So by looking at this tool, I can tell that I have elevation, right? I've got the sense of elevation being created by both lines and shading. For my purposes, what I'm trying to convey is very simple narrative information. There is an elevation, there is a waterway. I now have two surfaces, right? I have a surface that will require climbing over or going around, and I have a surface that will require going along or crossing using some sort of difficult movement. I have now created a gap. The gap is this space that my characters can move in between my two surfaces. This language of surfaces and gaps is one that comes into common usage in many military planning type scenarios, many tactics discussions, because it identifies how a combatant force can move through a space. I like that language. We're talking about battle maps. We are talking about creating tools for tactics to be created. So very quickly, I've got a very simple map. It doesn't convey a lot of extraneous information. And when I create a fast map, the only must-have information are surfaces and gaps. What are the borders that are involved? What are the boundaries that I need to worry about? And then how do my players move through that space? Both the player characters and my non-player characters, including adversaries. How do they move through the space? That's all I need to know. What is some should have information in these faster builds? Well, I think environmental cues. So from an environmental cue, the should have information is basically daylight or darkness in our fast map builds, in our 5-minute builds. Beyond that, beyond our surfaces in gaps and our daylight versus darkness cues, I don't think there's a whole lot that we need to include. This map right here gives my players the understanding and the ability to go in and have a combat action. That's it. That's all you need in a 5-minute map. And now you can start dropping information in terms of opponents, adversaries, non-combatants, NPCs that we're worrying about who are not going to be engaged in the action, and your players, right? So that's a very simple 5-minute map scale. Now, I am going to continue to use the convention, the grammar that we've established so far for map scale. So our smallest map was using mountain. So this is our less than 3 round map, and we are looking at 15-minute builds. 15 minutes. So we've got the map pulled up. We're going to do a 15-minute map build. What is the information that I must have, should have, could have in my 15-minute map build? I must have surfaces and gaps. At this level, surfaces and gaps take on an added component. Now I'm talking about borders versus boundaries in terms of surfaces, and I am talking about entrances and visibility in terms of gaps. My environmental cues must be there now. I must differentiate between daylight and darkness because I've got the time. What information should I have? My environmental cues now should add, in my opinion, artificial light sources, campfires, sconces, torches, things like that. And we should have obstacles in the space when we start talking about a 15-minute build. What kind of obstacles? Furniture, set pieces, items that players and opponents or non-combatants must navigate around. Essentially smaller scale surfaces. And then what could we have? Additional flavor. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and start the timer, and we're going to do a 15-minute build. This 15-minute build is going to be both an interior and an exterior space. So what do I want first? Well, I'm going to have some dirt. I'm actually going to go ahead and do limestone, rock, and dirt as my terrains. I am going to say that I have a more improved road running through this space. More improved road means more intensity and a little bit bigger space. Right? Improved road. At least 10 feet wide. And it's probably also got a little bit of interesting flavor to it. In this map grammar, I am using this rock to distinguish between my limestone for the purposes of giving my players, my audience, a sense of contrast and a sense of development. What do roads have in our day-to-day lives? They have curbs. This is essentially a curb or a ditch. Could I do this with dirt? Sure. Absolutely. It's going to be the same thing, right? All it's doing is providing contrast, which tells me that the landscape is changing. But in this case, I want it to be that. And I'm going to shrink some of it down. You can blend, you can do whatever you want. Cool. Is the blending important? It is from an artistic standpoint, but it's not necessarily important from a information standpoint, right? So I have a general landscape, I have a road. This is all currently gap. I can move unimpeded across all of this. Well, now I need some surfaces. And I'm going to say that from a surface standpoint, I'm going to turn the grid off here because I actually prefer to operate sans grid in my design style for the simple reason that it gives me a little more flexibility in what I'm doing. And it's how I turn the grid on when I put it into my tabletop, not here. So, all right. So now, very quickly, I have established some basic surfaces and I navigate over or through these buildings. They are truly surfaces. They have to be navigated around, absent being a flying creature. But now I want a building that my players can interact with. So this building that they're going to be able to interact with, and I'm going to go ahead and turn grid back on for a sense of scale, and I am going to zoom in so that we can see. I'm going to go ahead and snap this one to grid lines just for our artistic purposes. So I have a building now that is 20 feet by 15 feet. Definitely less than a round of movement to get through. What do I need? Well, I need portals. I need some sort of door. I don't like that door. I don't like that door. I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees. I like that door. Okay. What else do I want? Maybe I want some windows, right? Because windows are the kind of thing that people tend to have on their homes. Okay. So now what have I created? I have created surfaces, boundaries. I have created gaps. And in this case now, my gaps allow for entrance and exit, and they allow for visibility. Windows are principally a tool of visibility. They are secondarily a method of entrance and exit. Now, we have in just under 5 minutes, I've got 10 minutes and 13 seconds on the timer right now. I have created a very simple battle map with surfaces, with gaps, with boundaries. Do I have environmental cues? My environmental cues, if I have my lighting turned on, my environmental cues are going to come across with me. So that's my 5-minute build. Let's say I now have 15 minutes. I want to add some should have information, right? So should have information, objects. I want to go ahead and add a campfire, right? Campfire over here. Nice. Cool. We got a campfire. Now I want to add some additional information to that. I'm going to add that light tool. I'm going to go ahead and drop an illumination source. Let's say I want to have some additional good information. What did we talk about? We talked about furniture. So I want a table. I'm going to drop a very simple table into this room. Takes up about 5 feet of space. I am going to drop an environmental cue on it. I'm going to drop a light on it. Now, could I go ahead and add some type of additional object, like a lamp of some sort? Sure, why not? Do I have to add the lamp? Not necessarily. Does the lamp add something to the data? Sure, right? So now I've got a little bit of information. There's a lamp on the table. The lamp is lit. My players now may know by this information, by the grammar that I am using, that they could snuff the lamp out, break the lamp. Something could happen involving the lamp. So now I have surfaces, buildings that we cannot enter. I have surfaces that also have gaps in them, entrances, visibility. I have additional environmental cues, generalized global illumination in the terms of light and dark, as well as lighting cues in terms of natural fire, indoor illumination, things like that. What are some other obstacles that I might want to add? Perhaps I want to add a bed. Now, camp bed versus fancy bed versus whatever. It doesn't matter as long as your players understand that this is a bed. Well, now I have what? I have another surface in the room. I have an obstacle or a set piece that my players have to deal with. So if I then come in, my player comes in here to investigate this space. They have a table to investigate, they have a bed to investigate. If a combat action is occurring in here, that table and that bed now become obstacles in the room that they must maneuver around in order to engage in the combat action. So right now, I still have 5.5 minutes left, and I am talking to chat and having a good time. I've got a very simple under 3 turn map right here in less than 15 minutes. So I still have time. What does that mean? It means I can add flavor, right? I can make this more interesting. Perhaps I want my players to know that there's water someplace, right? Does this matter? Is it conveying important information? It may or may not be. We now may be getting into the point where in a 15-minute setting, I've conveyed the important information, and now I'm adding some flavor to the space, right? Maybe I want my players to understand that people here are gardening, right? That's important. Why is that important? It means that there may not be large-scale agriculture close by. It may mean that they are doing their own thing. They are more isolated, right? Does it automatically mean that? Absolutely not. Is it important that I have trees in this? Do the trees convey information? If they do, then it's important that I have them. If they don't, it's not important, right? It's all about what do they do, right? Scale matters, amount matters. Just hit under 3 minutes. And when I picked this up, I had 3 minutes left on the timer. Under 15 minutes, we have a simple, easy battle map, right? Under 3 turn battle map. But now that I've added spaces that people have to go into and come out of, I've probably increased the amount of time that it will take. I hope you found something interesting in that. Take it away. Use it to make your maps richer, more interesting, more engaging for your players at your table. We'd love to hear how it works out for you, so please leave a comment down below for us. And if you liked the video, click that thumbs up button. We'll see y'all soon. Cheers.